I was always more of a music fan, so I didn't have any instruments for a long time. But my dad he went to rehab and became sober, and then he was doing the 12-step program, and one of the steps is to make amends. And for that to make amends to me, he bought me a guitar, and I was 19, and so that was my first guitar. And I was going to art school, and I would paint at school, and then come home, and my hobby was like the guitar, and so I'd sit there and I'd practice and I'd learn things, and it was sort of a nice way to get away from all of the art school kind of stuff and do something quietly that wasn't related to that at all. But after a while I kind of got pretty good at it. So I kind of felt like I could be in a band if I wanted to, and I thought it sounded fun. My brother was writing songs, and we started a punk band together, so that was kind of how I started to get out there. Like, one thing about painting and stuff was it's very meditative, and like I think it's for my mental health it's really good, but the feedback doesn't come till later, and it's a lot less satisfying, I think. So I would do paintings and then we would show them and stuff like that, but it's a little bit different, you know, if you're at a show and people are kind of like responding to what you're doing straight away. So I do like that. Another thing that attracted me to music over the fine art world, because I became a artist assistant as well for a painter, quite famous painter in New Zealand, and I think music seemed more democratic, because I found in the art world it was I personally had a problem with like how few people decided like what went in the art world. I kind of like the idea that you kind of put your music out and it attracts how many people it attracts, and like I've kind of liked that a lot better as well. I was in a punk band with my brother in New Zealand, and then my son was born, and I left New Zealand and I wanted to get out of music, so I kind of went to Portland and started working for like film production, like a advertising company. The bass player in my band is his brother runs it, and so I asked to intern there, and I was kind of doing just whatever they needed me to do, like graphic design and stuff like that, and that was quite cool. Like, I liked doing that. I thought maybe I could do this, but then I started making music just privately by myself, and nobody knew that I was doing it. Like, not even my wife really knew. I was just kind of making it for myself. Then I put it on Bandcamp, and at that time there was a really big music blog world, and it started to spread on there because I sent it to a couple of friends who had blogs, and then people were kind of like taking the song, and it kind of like went on a small scale. It kind of went viral in that world and ended up on Pitchfork, and then I started getting offers from indie labels. So I met up with my friend, and I was like, oh, do you want to try and put a band together, because I think I might be able to like start a new band, and it seemed like a fun idea. So that's kind of how it started, really. Yeah. She was so good at being in trouble, so good at being in trouble, so good at being in trouble, so good at being. When I start recording music, my approach is usually something like sitting down with an acoustic guitar, or sitting down at the piano and writing it like it's a folk song, and trying to make it so that I can play it from beginning to end, and as a complete song, and then trying to figure out later how to turn it into a song that has a style with like full arrangements and stuff like that. So sometimes I'll have a song and I'll bring it to my bandmates or like my brother, and then we'll jam on the chords and try and figure it out. And sometimes we'll record those live and then try to build the song that way. And sometimes I just I do the same thing, but it's by myself. Like over the pandemic, I couldn't get together with my bandmates, so I had to do lots of stuff by myself, like play the drums by myself and stuff like that, which I don't really like to do. I prefer to get the band together in a room and then teach everybody what the song is basically, and then we can come up with kind of the tempo and the kind of like the feeling of the song, like the way that the genre of the song or whatever. So bad at being mellow. I think the influence my dad had on us was to play a lot of music. We were exposed to a lot of really interesting music when I was young, a lot of jazz. When we were younger, we kind of like were introduced to all of the great like jazz stuff, you know, Charles Mingus, Coltrane, Miles, all those kind of things. Things that when I was a kid, they seemed really obscure. They're not so obscure to me now, but like when I was a kid, it was like nobody knew who Miles Davis was for some reason, and growing up in New Zealand. And so Dad had that, and Frank Zappa I got introduced to really young, and it's just things like that. And I think that was the thing that really influenced us, just being surrounded by that kind of music. I had my own appreciation for it, so by the time I'd started art school and I had started to play the guitar, I was really into a lot of jazz and things like that. You know, I was into all the other stuff that people were into at that age as well, but like I have that, and I think it affected the way I hear music and stuff like that. Yeah. The genre that I would use to describe my music changes a lot, but like I have a few that I come back to, like sometimes I call it depression funk or dad wave sometimes. I don't know, it's just like I always come up with these genres that are like jokes, and that's the best way to describe it, I think, because I don't really know what it is unless it's just rock and roll. I think anything more specific, I just would rather make it into a joke, you know, because it's just music. It's not really. I think one thing that I get a little bit like annoyed at is when people call it psychedelic rock, because I don't really think it describes what we do very well. I think it's a little bit kind of like too muddy and dark to be psychedelic. So that's one thing, but people call it that all the time. I think it's partly because of the context that the band comes out in. I think like there's a lot of Antipodean psych rock, you know, Tame Impala and King Gizzard and those kind of bands. And I suppose we did sort of come out of a similar time and place, you know. Midnight, and I'm drying your tears on my sleeve. Let's leave the red messages on us, please. How many burgers you want to turn? How many times you want to get burned? Yeah, I think there's always been in Unknown Mortal Orchestra a layer of irony. I think I was pretty influenced by a lot of things by the era that I was born from, you know, that the band came out in, and I think there's a lot of irony in that wave of musicians. And I think that there's a certain amount, like there's a song called Guilty Pleasures on the new album, and that was kind of the flagship for the album at first, was that I was going to use a lot of influences that were that I would consider guilty pleasures, like well, not that I would consider guilty pleasures, but that some people would, maybe. Like the band Toto was a big influence, and thinking about them and thinking about what kind of band they are in the context of culture and stuff like that. They're not, you know, when like starting in the punk scene, that's not like that wouldn't have been the best band to use as a reference point, you know. So it's like, but I really think it's interesting to choose something like that because they're such a great band, and so they've kind of done so many things. But I think a lot of people would consider it a guilty pleasure to enjoy their music, and I'm kind of fascinated by that. Like why some bands like are perennially considered to be a cool reference, and then some other bands are somewhat like guilty pleasure. So I started from there, I think, and then I was trying to use a lot of trying to come up with the things that I love that are considered like weren't considered cool when I was in the punk in a punk band, you know. Christopher Cross is another one that I was thinking about a lot, and these things were really like inspiring to me to kind of use these references and know that there weren't a lot of other bands that would be saying this album is very influenced by Toto and very influenced by Christopher Cross and all this kind of stuff. Like I found that really inspiring, and it got my creative juices flowing, and also Hawaiian. My Hawaiian. Like my mom's from Hawaii, and she's a hula dancer, and she's like famous in her world, and so a lot of Hawaiian music was influencing my work as well, and I think it has a similar thing. Like Hawaiian culture has been very it's quite kitsch, and like so I kind of was inspired by that too. I like that. Let's get out of this jam. Let's get out of this broken place. Let's get out of this jam. I guess my attitude to the album is that it's one of the best things that came out of the music industry. So I really like albums. I like singles too. I think there's nothing wrong with singles, but I still believe it's important to have a cohesive album. Not everybody does that these days, and it's not necessary, but it's just how I enjoy music, and it's how I understand it. So it's just certain things that I need to do to feel like I'm doing what I'm actually making music. I don't think I could do what a lot of us do these days, which is to go into a different studio constantly and collaborate with different people all the time and just throw singles out and not really necessarily pay that much attention to albums. I think making albums to me is the rhythm of like what makes a musician, gives a musician's like life a bit of shape or something. And like growing up, like albums were important to me, so it's just really for myself, like, you know, it gives me some structure, so I think of it like that.